In this video, I'm going to be working on the backgrounds for the Pebble drawings. We're going to add in some more color layers. We're going to lift some of this color off. We're going to create the backgrounds that are used for these mindfulness drawings. It's a bit of a process. At certain points, they can look a bit dark and flooded with paint, so I find it's a bit of a process to add some media and then remove some media. I'm interested in the shapes that are left behind when colors get scrubbed out. Earlier, I took several of these backgrounds to the sink and I actually took a brush to them. They were just very dark. So what we are left with are these faded, weathered areas that just are very appealing. I find them very appealing, I think. Is the best way to describe it. And you can compare just how harsh the colors look here compared to with some of that paint literally weathered out. So, I see a couple of you out there. Hello, welcome in. Glad to have you this evening. The media that I am looking at tonight are the Neocolor 2, which is a wax pastel, but it's water soluble. So you can lay it down like a crayon and then add a bit of water to it and it is activated. And when you add the water, it achieves a sort of a paint-like consistency. I can also place some of the media right down on the mat, add water to it, apply it with a brush like a paint. Randy Rabbit, welcome in. Hello. Good to see you. How are you? How was your weekend? I'm going to start by re-wetting some of this bright pink and then lifting it off a bit, or at least smoothing out these lines. Randy, I feel that. Only share what you're, never share anything that makes you uncomfortable to share. I want this space to be a place where folks can come in, and I certainly don't want anybody to share any kind of personal information that might make them identifiable on the web. I'm always aware of internet safety, so I know sometimes I get to peppering away the questions, but I think it's really important that we bear in mind the ways that our data can be mined. And it could be anything from where'd you grow up? Well, there's your hometown, which might be where you were born, and that might be a security question. So things that maybe seem innocent, sometimes they're not so innocent. It it could be an innocent kid on the other side of that keyboard, in the other side of that chat, asking you, did you have a childhood pet? Did you have a stuffed animal? And sometimes data miners ask those questions because they're trying to find out what our passwords might be. So anyway, it is never my intention to make anybody feel um, exposed. So uh, well, yeah, maybe what I should say is I hope that your week was, I hope that it was more good than bad, and that I'm recognize you and I'm smiling that I see your name in my chat. I'm kind of new at this, so I'm still getting the hang of it, and I appreciate the feedback. Well, see, I'll be 63 in a bit, and I'm not a grandmother, because I didn't get to be a mom, but, and I have a cat, so, in Western Massachusetts, and see, I'm over in Western Oregon. So, yeah, I've recently found out that I'm autistic. So that explains a whole lot of the things I've struggled with for all my life. Autism is something we're born with, it's not acquired, and it's just a different way of being wired. So, and one of the things that people with autism struggle with is interpersonal, not necessarily communication, but reading social cues and trying to figure out things like the correct answer to the question, how are you? Turns out most people say fine, and for me, I'm so literal that I can only say, oh, I'm fine if I'm actually fine. So I find myself just oversharing or undersharing, and um, yeah, so I'm right with you in the, hey, this is a bit awkward. Empty media. Oh my gosh. What do you know about Scientology, man? Uh, oh my gosh. Oh, Matthew. Um, it just, like, my face is, I'm blushing. Okay. I saw you today with the police officer in Pasadena, and boy, you sure have some decent human beings in that police department. And I loved how he didn't even talk to the guy in orange. He just, like, he kind of looked and sized it up and went, yeah, I have this obligation to go and just make sure that I make a statement, and I'm just going to get that out. But he was decent, and he was following the law, and I love that you got that on video, and I hope that other police can just take a look at that, and maybe they could do better. I watched what some of them were up to on, was it Friday night in Hollywood? And oh, for Pete's sake. Knuckleheads, a lot of them. Yeah, so. Uh, Absolutely not, Randy asks if I am a Scientologist. I am not. I was involved in a high demand religion. I was married to somebody who was in a cult. But I was not, never have been, and never will be a Scientologist. I'm. Ah, okay. So, Randy says that she's really good at reading social cues. So probably too good, and it causes you too much stress to be so on guard. It is coming on 1 a.m. in Oregon. Yeah. Well, um, I didn't get sucked into the cult, even though they tried really hard, and he also got out of it. So it's not all. Yeah, that's close. We're close in age. So yeah. So Randy, you must come at this from looking at art, and a lot of the people who kind of run past my channel or stop in and say hello, quite a few of them are involved in protest work, trying to educate people about um, cults and high demand religions, and the work that we're doing in this community is just to try to get the word out so that people can begin to recognize high demand religions, and hopefully young people can know that there are cults that are trying to recruit them. And um, I won't speak for MD Media, but for me, I want to let every young person I run across know that sometimes people that want to be your friends are really trying to recruit you into a cult. And especially being neurodivergent, I see the folks that are in or that have come out of Scientology, and I think if you looked at their demographics, I really feel like there's quite a few people who are neurodivergent who are maybe we're more susceptible to um, trusting people we shouldn't trust who have motives that are not always very good. So, Goldie, Steph, hello. Art journaling, love that. Absolutely. Just intrigued and delighted with that. Started to work on art journals in the last couple of years, and um, yeah, if you don't mind sharing, um, do you do mixed media in your art journaling? I tend to start mine with ink and stencils and rubber stamps, and then um, things along those lines. And the one that I'm very slowly working on this year, I've got a couple of I got paintings, but I'm working on drawings in these. So you guys see me like doing a lot of scribbling and slopping paint around, but I actually do a little bit of other work that's not quite as crafty looking, not quite as messy. And sometimes I'll just get out the old gel pens and make patterns. This was a this was a stamp that I carved, and I guess the thing about art journals, we can just put anything we want in them. Yeah, I guess I was feeling rainbows. That didn't date these pages, so um, this is technically this is I started this one, and then I'm well into another loose leaf one. I have one that I completed, so to anybody out there who I struggle to get stuff completed, that's part of the ADD. But I got one, just like all the pages in the book to the end of it. I was pretty pleased with that effort. It's clear across the room. I can't get to it, so I'm not gonna literally have the tripod and the light stands between me and it. So another day I'll show you that. I'm going to set this one aside to dry. So I was thinking about that. I don't think I've managed to get through a live stream without having some discussion about the protest work or Scientology, even though I'm not um, I'm not healthy enough to withstand the things that happen to people when protesting. So that's not ever going to be my jam. It would take one episode of being bull baited, and I'd probably have to make a trip to the ER. But so I try to be supportive of people who are doing that work. It's really, I feel like it's important work, and mostly what I want to do with my channel, mostly what I feel like I'm here to do, is just to provide a bit of space for people to come to and look at some pretty colors and chit chat with each other, think about art, get their mind off the sort of nastiness of it. Because there's a side to it that, like you said it, Randy, you just said ew. And I just hope to take a little bit of the ooh away from things. Maya, hello, welcome in. How are you doing? What's going on? And oh, let me see. Let me try again. Randy's working with me on my questions. I hope that you are well, and I'm glad to see you. I get excited when I see people coming in, because I was sitting here for several minutes with 0 in the chat, so I think sometimes I'm a little over enthusiastic. And frankly, I hope I never stop being surprised and pleased that 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 there's folks out there. I think being delighted by that is it's a happy feeling. It's a grateful feeling. It probably informs the work that I'm doing when I'm doing my chores and other things that are not this. I'll sometimes think, oh, I can't wait to get to the studio and turn the camera on it and talk to other artists out there, see what they're up to. Whatever reason, it's just a lot of fun. Oh my, I'm so sorry. Migraines. Yeah. I used to get classic migraines, and I only get them if I'm really stressed and really angry about something that's frustrating, and I can't, when you just get pissed off and you just can't get any traction in getting something changed or done. But as I've gotten older, I've learned to manage those situations a lot better, so I don't get those kind of headaches too much anymore. But I do get cluster headaches, which are like small migraines that are really intense, and they don't last very long, but they're really intense. And they come in groups. Like I'll have one or several a day for days and days in a row. And for me, they seem to be triggered at the change of seasons in the fall. And last year I got through the fall without having, I might have had 2 or 3 of them, which for a migraine sufferer, you're just like, okay, well, that's nothing. I've got, that's a walk in the park if you can only get a couple of them. But our weather has held pretty good out here in Oregon. We did have a few days of rain this week, so that was kind of nice. Everything got a little bit of water. And it's the rain that we get this time of year, it's such a relief because it's signals the end of wildfire season, so I think most people are glad to see it even if they're not too fond of rain. This part right here just looks like a shrimp to me. So when the weather changes gradually, I don't get the headaches. But when it changes abruptly and we go from like 80-degree days to 60-degree days, that's when those headaches start slamming. So let's just keep our fingers crossed for steady weather for everybody. Absolutely. Hi, Sophia. Yeah, the barometric pressure changes. Those are, they just seem to, I don't know, for me they're associated with the headaches, and I don't particularly feel like I've got sinus pressure or pressure in my ears or anything like that, but it just must be enough to trigger the nervous system in some way. I'm trying to think if there's anything that I can suggest that's helpful. I do avoid some of those classic food triggers like the chocolate and the aged cheeses, and when I know I'm kind of in headache season, I really don't drink very much at all. But red wine for me, that's something that I don't know if it triggers a headache, but I know that if I've had red wine, the headaches seem worse. So, Maya says that she gets them if she doesn't eat and drink enough, or if her neck is hurting. Yeah. Yeah, probably just stay hydrated. Keep the stress down. Don't let situations and folks, don't let them get under your skin if you can avoid it. I find these colors very cheery. Yeah. Tannin, yeah. Yeah, we can be sensitive to the sulfites in those wines too. Maya says in the old days she could drink whatever and party for days. The minute she hit 30, she got hungover just by thinking of alcohol. Oh, yes, Steph, lack of sleep. Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, I think my drinking, usually like I'd have a beer if I was having pizza, or a glass of wine if I was having dinner in a restaurant. And in 2020, when everything just shut down and changed, I wasn't in those environments anymore. So I rarely, like I remember I had a lovely glass of microbrew over in Sisters, Oregon last summer with a handmade pizza. It was a fantastic combo. But, there, when I was young, it was like, oh yeah, it's Friday night, it's beer time. Or, now see, Randy Rabbit knows what she knows my age, so she knows the truth is closer to, oh, wine cooler time. Yeah, yeah. I like ciders, which I never really we didn't have them out here in you could get a bottled cider, but it wasn't a beverage that was handcrafted. And you folks may not know, but Oregon is sort of known for microbrews, a lot of beers, and ciders are something that's kind of new. And we have a lot of land. The Willamette Valley, which is west of the Cascade Mountains, the big mountains with Mount Hood and Mount St. Helens, and kind of the famous Pacific Crest Trail runs through the Cascade Mountains. And just west of that is the Willamette Valley, which is a huge area for agriculture. But it had shifted from fruit trees. Fruit production had moved further north into the Hood River Valley and into, well, it was always going in Washington State, southern Washington State. But there's a lot of land that was set aside for, had traditionally always been under cultivation. And people discovered that wine grapes grow quite well in this climate. So we have quite the winemaking industry here. And along with that came people who wanted to make craft beer. So I've been in Germany. Our craft beer is good, but it's nowhere near what your German beer is, what can just be had in a beer garden. It's amazing beer in Germany. And Belgium, oh my goodness. Had something called Creek beer in Belgium that is made with a crush of cherries. My grandfather was a cherry farmer. And now, actually, part of his farm is um, part of a city park here in town. And I think they're trying to grow a few wine grapes on the other part of it that's still under cultivation. So I feel like I rambled off my point there. Oh, so yeah, we do have people that are making alcoholic cider that's pretty amazing. Hello, Tiff. Just checking your comments. Uh, the microbreweries, yep, yep, yep. Um, so in 2015, Oregon legalized medical green plant. or it was medical, and then we legalized recreational. And since then, like, that's just my preferred thing to do. If it's Friday night, I would like to have some of that and then sit and listen to, well, my favorite thing is to listen to Miles Davis, Kind of Blue, or, just sit and listen to an album for an hour. Get the pain out, get the music in. And for me, I prefer that because I don't feel like I've been worked over. Sometimes with alcohol, I just feel sore. My body will feel like I got pummeled the next day. It's not a hangover exactly, just feel kind of toxic. And glad that we have some other options now. Yeah, exactly. Uh, yeah, Sophia mentions that if you grew up on German beer and the European one, everyone else has a hard time measuring up. It's like bread. And I'm just thinking of, like, the habit of going to a bakery that was, I couldn't even narrow it down to one country, like in Austria or Switzerland or France or Germany, Italy. I mean, everywhere you guys have better bread. And you can find bakeries. I mean, I live a few blocks away from a bakery, but no, Europe and Great Britain. You've got, you got the bread thing handled way better than we do where I live. So Tiff says yes, green is the way to go. Yeah, I don't. You're not legalized for that in Norway, right, Maya? So it would be quite a risky thing to do. Yeah. My father said something interesting, that the Berlin Wall had gone up in his lifetime, and when it came down, he said, I never thought I'd live to see that come down. I thought once it went up, it would just always be that way. And he really marveled that enough change had happened to bring the wall down. And when I was young, I could never have imagined that we would have legalized uh, cannabis at all. I thought it'll always be something that's illicit, and it won't be like alcohol prohibition, because we did have alcohol prohibition in the United States in the late 20s, mid to late 20s into the 30s, and eventually such a criminal enterprise sprung up around providing alcohol that our government basically had to say that they had to admit that they weren't going to stop people from drinking alcohol, and began to regulate it so that we could have, I think mostly probably so the government could make money on what was going to be sold anyway. Yeah. Oh, Tiff. Yay. Do you do you tell people what state you live in, Tiff? If you don't share. But if it's, I'm interested if you do. Yeah. Ohio. Okay. All right. Yeah, it wasn't too difficult to be an activist out here in Oregon because pretty much everybody you talked to was like, "Yeah, we need to legalize that." And it, I don't get surprised anymore by. Um, I think I'm more surprised when I meet somebody who doesn't smoke or doesn't. Um, well, there's a lot of ways to consume that don't involve smoking, but we just kind of use the slang of smoker. To be a smoker doesn't mean to smoke cigarettes out here in the Pacific Northwest. It means that you're using legal cannabis. So yeah, so you haven't yet. So Oregon did that in steps. Like it became illegal, but there were no dispensaries for the first 6 months. And we still had, because we'd had the medical program for quite a while, and we'd had caregivers in the medical program who were growing, I want to say 3 plants per patient, something like that. And there were provisions in that law for, um, I think the kind of the standard you could pay out for people who were helping you was 2 ounces. So that's why we still have that. If you work on trim crew and you're not getting paid, your standard pay is 2 ounces. So if you're growing a plant for somebody, somebody will kick you back 2 ounces. It's just, it's sort of standard weed math out here in Oregon. Nice. Well, Sophia says she's in Germany, and they have a long tradition of hemp usage around where she is, and our old culture wasn't against using the natural ingredients to get high either. So we're pretty chill about it, even if it's not legal yet. That's actually a heck of a lot more logical. Um, we at the founding of the United States, we hemp was an important crop, and it the cultivation of hemp just got stomped out with this culture war on on what was called marijuana, which is a term I don't love to hear or use. And some people use that term with affection, but a lot of people who are um, who've kind of gotten suckered into the propaganda about who uses it and why tend to use it as a bit of an insult or a slur. So, but we had this kind of crazy period at the beginning after it was well, it had been decriminalized in the 70s, but then when it was legalized and we started to actually have state oversight of the dispensaries and the growers, um, it was a period of time. And so it was legal early in 2015, but then you couldn't find it to buy until I want to say October of 2015 because we had this quite silly thing that was we wanted to pretend that no seed was planted until it was actually legalized, which was a bit silly. And then I remember that year we had a lot of the shops decided they were going to run a Green Friday special. And you could buy an ounce of product for $20. Yeah, Maya, that's. I don't know what the point is if they take everything out that's useful. And I was talking about this on the last live stream because I had the cardiac procedure in March, and my surgeon and my cardiologist were both just um, categorically forbid smoking. And then when I came back and I was talking to my cardiologist, and I was like, yeah, but it's okay if I bake with it, right? And make edibles. And he was like, no, some of those strains raise your heart rate. And so you risk having a heart attack. And we just, so no for at least 6 months. And I knew from having used various strains that you just don't know until you try it the first time. And a lot of them do raise my blood pressure and raise my heart rate. So I'm kind of sensitive that way to it. So I just kind of went, okay, all right. I went a lot of years during Prohibition where I was on an extended break. So I did get into it the couple of weekends ago, and oh my goodness, was it was very nice to just hang out, listen to some music, and feel all those knots and aches and pains unwind. It just is. When I think about all of the work that government should be doing, I think that just taking this on and managing this, it's like, can't we do better things with our government resources? This just seems like a silly waste of. Hey, no face. Yeah. Whoops. What was going on here? Stop that. Managed to bring up 16 windows there. And kind of, I'm not sure. Sometimes I start talking about it and I think, oh, I better take a look up in the chat and see if I've really outraged anybody. But so far, nobody is. Nobody has really just called me a dirty hippie and made their way out. So, but it's interesting now, all the people you meet and you're all walks of life. I love this Viridian color, but it really got quite dark. And I know when I go to put the lines on it that it'll be hard to see, so I'm just gonna lift some of it out of here. But it's gorgeous. Kind of looks like sea glass or something along those lines. You know what? I'm gonna actually blot this onto paper so that I'm reading chat. Um, yeah, Maya says I'm not doing it illegally, so it shouldn't be a problem to talk about it. I think for me, the concern is that because YouTube goes out all over the world, and that a lot of places where it goes, it's not yet legal. And then also just because of the age of people that can be in our chats without us knowing. And I've never heard of anybody having their channel dinged or shut down for the sort of discussions that we have in here. I have heard of some channels that are just sort of devoted to sitting and smoking. Like, that is not tolerated, so. Guess I'm a little bit of a goody-goody two-shoes. Yeah. No Face. I like that idea. No Face says that the government should take all of Scientology's unpaid tax money and reimburse the public with weed. They're pretty Scientologists are pretty anti-weed too. Although we know some ex-Scientologists who are just helping the green cause go forward. I think I've just made the whole entire thing green now. I don't know, maybe this one will be something else. It's such a beautiful color. I don't know if I can bear to take too much of it off there. Sophia, so you're not everyone's bud. Whatever. I like that way of looking at it. That's a great way to look at it. I'm not trying to be everyone's bud. I just don't want to upset anybody. That's not my vibe all the time. I'm usually willing to upset people, but for a cause, for a good cause, I think. We need a little upset in society. That's how we get things to change, and stuff to stop being abusive, and institutions to stop being abusive. And alrighty, let's stop taking paint off and start putting some paint on. I can remember being in Germany and France too Oh, Germany. Because I couldn't, it was over 100 degrees Fahrenheit when it was like 106 in Berlin, and I was just cooking. And where I grew up, if you were hot, you made a beverage with ice in it, and I couldn't get a glass of ice water or iced tea. And I finally remembered that McDonald's has a franchise agreement that everybody who has a franchise has to agree to serve McDonald's food in a particular way. And that means the soda, they have to buy McDonald's branded cups, and on the side of the cup is a line, and that line says ice. And so even in Germany, you could get a beverage with ice in it. So I would go into McDonald's to get some cold cold water. And like I got scolded by waitresses who were just like, "No, you can't pay me any money to I got one ice cube in a beverage." And I said, "Please, could I just pay you to bring me more?" And she just put her hand on her hip and looked at me and said, "No, it is so bad for your stomach. I am not bringing you ice. It is just you're gonna hurt your body drinking cold beverages. It's like 106 degrees." And so I went to McDonald's to get a beverage with ice, and you go in there, and then so there's some things that are just they have to fit the corporate mold in order for you to keep your contract with McDonald's, but they also do things differently in Europe. So looking around, there were people sitting at the table eating a Big Mac with um, a little half can. They must be a standard soda can in the United States is 12 ounces, so they must have been like a 6-ounce can of beer, and beer was on the menu. So to me, that looked very odd because we don't sell beer at McDonald's in America, but you do in Germany. So kind of cool. I like that blend everything. But yeah, no iced tea and no peanut butter, and it was a long summer. You don't know until you're someplace where you can't get the things you're accustomed to. And I never really thought about it. But peanut butter is something that's very, at least when I was there in the 1991. Nutella, man, you could get Nutella all over the place. I'd never had that. It was available here, but it just was sort of a gourmet or an expensive food that we wouldn't eat regularly. 14? Uh, I hope you're just laughing at that and not actually shocked, Maya. Well, I don't know, maybe my my Oregonian body reacts by getting cooler when I have a cold beverage. I'm I'm convinced of that. Oh, I only just had a weekend to see all of Berlin, and I was just determined that I was not gonna, despite the heat, that I went out and just saw everything that I could see. And it was a privilege to be there. It was really interesting. Um, when I was coming up, the neighboring state had a drinking age of 18. But my state had a drinking age of 21. But my family took a vacation and we went to Yellowstone Park when I was 20. And so I was in Wyoming when I had my first legal beer and went into this. It's still there. It's called the $1 Million Cowboy Bar. Silver Dollar Cowboy Bar? Something like that. In Jackson Hole, Wyoming. And the bar stools are saddles, horse saddles. Yeah, Nutella is sort of chocolate and hazelnut. And now it's pretty inexpensive, but it used to be like probably 3 or 4 times the cost of peanut butter. And we would use it, um, we would not just spread it on toast and have it for breakfast. It would just be maybe like a really, I can't think of a way to describe this, but like if you had cake or cupcake and there would be something very fancy on the top that was just luxury, that's how we treated Nutella when about that era. Yeah. Yeah, peanut butter. I think peanuts are used quite a bit in Africa, but just it's not grown. It's not the kind of crop that gets grown in, or was grown in Europe. So, plus you had Nutella. Why would you eat peanut butter if you had Nutella? Well, also it's kind of sugary, and I think maybe a sugary breakfast isn't for everybody. I know in Scandinavia, breakfasts tend to be more savory than sweet. Um, I think a lot of kids who grew up, a lot of families who didn't have a ton of money, peanut butter was protein, so. And if you got, trying to, there's probably not a nice way to say this, but if you got government subsidized food because you were poor, like you might get a block of cheese that was processed American cheese, and you might get a jar of peanut butter, and those would be the protein options, so. So interesting to hear from you guys how your lives are and all the different places we come from. So in some countries, if you're out with your family, like maybe you're out for dinner, the children can consume alcohol, wine or beer. They can't, like a 14-year-old can't walk into a wine shop in France and buy a bottle of wine. But if they're at a restaurant, and I'm not sure what the age, but just hypothetically. So the parents are kind of in charge of what kind of beverages their children would eat at the table. And I believe the UK, I'm not sure if their laws have changed, but I know at one point you could, I want to say 16, you could have ale or beer at a pub. So in the United States, we have places that are uh, taverns or bars where they serve food, and minors can't come in on their own, but they can come in with a guardian or a parent. So you might go get a hamburger or some sort of food in those places, and beer and wine is served. And those are a little bit different. We have kind of two tiers. We have bars that serve mixed drinks with hard alcohol in Oregon. And then in the United States, it's different in every state and territory. So um, generally, you can't take kids into places where they serve hard drinks. whiskey, distilled spirits. But in places where it's wine and beer is served, you can usually take minors, and then in some places you can take them in until a certain, like 9 or 10 p.m. And then there's New Mexico. When I was in New Mexico, you could get a drive-through drink, a hard, like vodka, whiskey. You could go through a drive-through and get a mixed drink in a plastic cup in your car. Go through a drive-through. Just insane to me. You could buy distilled spirits in a grocery store, but you had to go to a liquor store to buy beer and wine. And that seems absolutely backwards to me, because the more potent alcohol was just on the shelf. But you wanted a six-pack, boy, you had to go to a liquor store. And then being able to buy alcohol while you're driving your car? That's crazy. That was in the 1980s, and I think they've changed their laws since then. But just America, man. Oh God, Nature Valley bars, right? No face. No face. I'm so glad that you don't have to live in a tent anymore. Just when I lived in Anchorage, we used to have of course, the winters in Anchorage are pretty harsh, and you can't leave unhoused people out in that weather because they will literally freeze to death overnight. So we had groups of people, teams of people who would go out and bring unhoused people into the shelters, and lots of shelter. When I moved back to Oregon, and then Oregon has a tremendous problem with, I think it really comes down to our housing, that we have allowed landlords to just have the upper hand so much, and rents are very high, housing is hard to come by, and they're able to just network themselves, the landlords, and blacklist people. So if you ever had a roommate who tore something up, you might not be able to find housing in the metropolitan areas, because the landlords have created a system where they check their references and they keep lists of people. And it's just, I think if we could tackle that and roll some of that back, that we wouldn't have so many people who are making their own household as best they could, wherever they could. But there were a couple of cases where somebody was literally found frozen to a sidewalk up in Anchorage, and folks in the community responded and went, "We're not going to let this happen again." Still pretty awful, but yeah, I'll tell you folks, we are all one missed diagnosis away from being homeless ourselves. And I have a story about that, but I'm really not prepared to share it tonight, so it's a thin line, a very, very thin line between housed and unhoused. And thank everybody who works to provide transitional housing. Yeah, so Maya says that Maya is in Norway, and the housing there is getting insane. They have close to the highest rents in the whole country. Everyone is making their rental apartments and houses into Airbnb for tourists. That's a huge problem here in Oregon. And our coastal communities, people are having a hard time because even the crappiest apartments have been converted into Airbnbs. And folks that we have people renting Airbnbs who are leasing apartments and they never live in them. So they go in and they act like they're going to reside in the apartment, and then they just rent it out on Vrbo or Airbnb. So that's the other reason why housing has become just crazy tight. And I'm all for people making their money, but we've got to balance it somehow. We've got to, until we restrict that short-term rental and maybe say a certain percentage in any given area can be dedicated to that, we're still going to have people who rent apartments and then use them for short-term rental, no matter how many apartment buildings we build. And if the area's got tourist traffic, we don't fix the housing problem just by building more buildings. We have to come in and legislate the short-term rental market. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and Maya, you've just got Maya has reindeer walking across her front porch. So, there's so many problems. I'm not joking about that. You should throw a link up to that short of yours with the reindeer walking across your walking across your welcome mat. I love that thing. Yeah. Well, let's see if I can find a. Everything's kind of in process right now. I didn't have a lot that were ready to go for Pebble drawings, but let me see what I can find. We'll do a Pebble drawing if I can find a, please. Find a blank. You know, I may not have one. Ah, that one's dry enough. Let's call it. Thanks for keeping me company, guys, while I work through some of those. We just have. I just got behind in getting the blanks prepared, so. There it is. I started watching that short, and I had no. I was like, I wonder what's going to happen. I was like, it looked like a very cold day, and I hear the clip, clop, clip, clop. You guys, yeah, that's short. That's great. And I remember where I was working for the BLM up in Alaska, up in Anchorage, and I lived in a community just north of Anchorage. Not that you couldn't have this happen in the middle of downtown Anchorage, mind you, because it's just that kind of a place. But I go barreling out of my apartment. I'm heading to work. Let's pull this guy out so our focus is a little better. And there was no window in the door. I came up the stairs because I lived in the sort of a daylight basement apartment. And I came up a half flight of stairs and across the landing and opened the door, and I was looking at the broadside of a moose. And it took, that oh shit moment of what the hell, and shut the door and kind of stood there for a moment just trying to get my wits about me because there was one door out of that building. And there's and moose are tall. They are not small creatures. And his ears were laid back and the hackles were up, which is and moose, I just don't know if they're ever in a good mood, but you just don't want to mess with them at all. So I go back in and I'm looking at the windows and I'm trying to figure out if I can crawl out the window because it's a daylight basement, so the windows are kind of tall and they're a bit. That was not an option, and they opened into sort of wells, so you couldn't like get out the window and then and out. And I called my boss at the BLM and I was like, and his name was literally Yogi, was my boss's name. And I said, Yogi, I think I'm going to be late this morning because there's a moose on my front porch. And he just goes, oh my God, well, don't mess with it. Just go back inside. So I had to call in late to work due to moose that day. Yeah, it was just like a yearling moose, and he was just standing on the front porch, just taking a little shelter from the snow, I think. Um, I love that kind of stuff, man. I'm just for anything that's kind of wild and woolly like that. And we would see black bear through town. There's kind of a green corridor that runs through the center of Anchorage, so there's a protected corridor where wildlife can move north to south. Uh, I don't know that there were any brown bears or grizzlies in that area, and they would have been moved on because they're really not compatible with in close proximity to human populations. Black bears pretty much leave everything alone, but brown bears won't. Anyway, not long after that, we got a hold of the building managers and they replaced the doors with ones that had windows in them so that we could see the moose. We didn't do anything to dissuade the moose. We just made it so it would be easier for us to sort of live there if the moose was once again. And he hung out for a couple weeks and just sort of took shelter on the porch there. But I really loved living in that neighborhood because I could actually see a mountain range out my kitchen window. And then about 2 blocks away, as I was headed into town from there, you could see Denali. Just, out the car window, driving to work. Well, I know Sophia says there's a town in Alaska where you're not allowed to lock your car in case of a person needing to flee from polar bears. I know if you see pictures of actually quite a few places out in the bush, but up in Nome or areas at the north, um, you'll see a lot of the big round parabolic mirrors or repurposed truck side view mirrors mounted on the corners of houses so that you can look in the mirror and see around the corner so you don't get ambushed by polar bear. Yeah, one of the only places federal employees are allowed to bring weapons to work is up there in northern Alaska. They actually had a young polar bear break into a building while a BLM worker was at his desk, and the polar bear came in through the window and when the worker came back to work, there was a polar bear rug under his desk. But that fellow was lucky to survive that. Yep, he got attacked pretty thoroughly by that bear, but they're okay once they're a little bit older. They're apex predators, but when they're young, they just are even more dangerous. Yeah, exactly, Maya. So Maya says in Svalbard, you are not allowed to walk outside the village without a rifle. Wolves, I don't think I would really like to encounter. I don't think I would really like to encounter wolves because they run in packs and they, I'd like to see them though. We've reintroduced them. They were hunted to extinction here in Oregon because we had cattle ranchers and sheep farmers, and wolves were seen to be predators for those herds. And then there was a move to reintroduce wolves, and now we do have wild wolf pack in eastern Oregon and moving head towards the west. Hey, buddy. Yeah, Oregon has we have cougar here too, and I've never actually seen one, but I was hiking up in the Cascade Mountains, and I looked at my hiking buddy, because I had this feeling like we were being observed, and the hair on the back of my neck stood up, and I heard just the tiniest little sound. And we'd been hiking, and I just had an uneasy feeling for probably a good half a mile, three quarters of a mile. And I was hiking with my cousin, and I said, "Did you hear that?" And at that point, she said, "I've been thinking I was hearing things for about a half a mile." And we both just kind of looked at each other, and immediately we both just kind of knew that what we were thinking was that we were being tracked by a cougar. And they are big enough to take you down. They're they're very powerful, and they're very stealthy. And there's really nothing else that would track along. Most other animals, if they encountered humans, would move away from you. But uh, cougars will kind of, well, they'll stalk you. And I don't think we've really had cougar attack in Oregon, but there have been a couple of cases out in Colorado where a human was had a cougar chase them and jump on them and try to take them down. So we and the other thing, of course, that might be kind of stalking along beside you is another human being. So either way, we decided that turning around and heading back to the trailhead was the best move there. And whatever it was stayed with us for probably for some distance. And so we just made noise and beat feet. And we did not run. Running is not the answer when you are confronting or being confronted by mountain lions. Because they're like big cats. If you run, they'll chase you. Yeah. Yeah, there's some talk in chat about wolves that escape from a zoo and whether or not wolves are... Yeah, wolves are unlikely to prey on humans. I mean, I think if there's a small human and it's... that might be another thing, but just to sort of paddle along and then try to stalk a grown adult, they're probably... I don't worry about it at all. But then I also don't really hike in areas where wolf packs are known to move. They're really in pretty remote areas. They're not located in places where we have hiking trails. But mountain lions, or we call them in Oregon, we call them cougar. Those are close in enough that you just do have to be mindful of them. And we also have black bear. We don't have any grizzly or brown bear in Oregon. And they are, like, they make noise. They're not real stealthy. So when you encounter them, it's usually like, what is that big crashing noise? Oh, it's a bear tearing a trunk open, trying to get to insects or honeycomb. But I've I've been hiking most of my life. That's the only time I've really ever encountered a wildlife situation where I thought, I'm going back to the car. What a strange range of stories and conversation for me tonight. Yeah. Anyway, that. So, if you're familiar with Oregon, that encounter with what I'm pretty sure was a cougar happened up at Opal Creek Wilderness Area, and that area was just devastated by the wildfires that happened in 2020. So it's still, I think it's still not even open. Like the forest was just burned and knocked down, and all of the trails that were up there had wildfire move across them. So anything that had a handrail or any kind of wooden steps that had been sunk in for tricky areas, it was all destroyed. So we did have a couple of those wilderness areas open back up this last year, but um, that area is just not going to be the same ever. Huh. So you have lynx in Norway. They're pretty good sized critters. I don't think I'd want to tangle with one. Yeah. Yeah. Maya, I was watching that back to. Um, sometimes I often take a look at sections of them to see just what was working and what wasn't working. And for some reason, the AI was available on that video. So I asked it questions about the video, and I was laughing just as hard when I reviewed that thing as I was during the um, during the live stream. If for you guys that weren't here, I just was telling myself jokes about woodchucks. I don't I don't quite know how it got started, but I got a case of the giggles. And of all of the things that I had worried about happening during a live stream, me losing my composure and laughing without being able to stop laughing was not one of the things that I had foreseen. And anyway, it happened towards the end of the last live stream, so if that's your thing, if listening to somebody laugh their head off, I don't think I snorted. I don't think it got quite that out of hand, but it was I just couldn't I just couldn't stop laughing. And then yeah, and there were comments about like just what would happen um if I did put a woodchuck in my mouth. And yeah, you'll just we might have to I'll might have to link to the video. Uh, good times. And no, there was no weed involved in this either. Usually if I'm laughing about stuff like woodchucks, there's at least one joint involved. Okay. There might have well, I laughed so hard I made my nose run, which I didn't. Golly. I mean, I suppose it might have happened before and I just didn't notice it, but I'll tell you, when you're live streaming and your nose is running, you notice it. But you guys, I will go to great lengths to entertain you. Well, it wasn't my fault. It all started with vegan paints. And I was on a tangent about vegan lifestyles and told myself the joke about putting animals in my face, and then it just it's kind of went to the just I will say this. I think this is a general rule. Don't put a woodchuck in your face. If you're vegan, vegetarian, flexitarian, keep those woodchucks out of your face. Well, and then Dan popped up and he said he didn't think the woodchuck would like it very much if somebody tried to put the woodchuck in their face. And poor woodchucks. Oh. So I asked the AI to make a description of the video, and I might just post it because it was almost as funny as the whole woodchuck thing. Well, I really like how this one turned out. What do you guys think? If I can get the camera to focus on it, maybe. There we go. Hmm. Yeah, I really like the way the rock looks right up here. I don't think I'll even need to make any. A few. I always put in a few highlights and lowlights. Oh, if the woodchuck knew the joke, the woodchuck would have run for the hills. She's insane. I need to get away from her. This is gonna try to put my head in her mouth. It's not gonna be good. Oh my goodness. Well, we made progress. I made some progress on a whole. I didn't get to those ones. Yeah, made progress on quite a few of these backgrounds. So that's. Let me have it, kitty. Holy cats. Oh, okay, I see what you're telling me. Oh, okay. There's a giant spider. Oh, the cat came and was telling me a story a few minutes ago, and I told her it was not time for food, and she looked at me like I was just a dumbass. And now I see that she was telling me that there was a spider about this big around down here. Um, so I think I'm gonna go deal with this spider. And yeah, so oh, okay. Yeah, I worked through quite a few of these. So do you think you could handle the spider, buddy? That would be excellent. Well, that's a first. Okay. Um, okay, see, usually the cat just comes and tells me there's a spider. She doesn't chase them or do anything with them, but she seems to be interacting in a cat-like way with the spider, so I think I'm going to be safe. Oh, wow. Yeah. Well, this is my own fault because she does come and tell me when there's something's amiss. And oh, at any rate, um, uh, thanks everybody for coming in. Thanks for spending time and for keeping me company while I make a little bit of art. Um, I hope you all just have a terrific week coming up. I'm gonna wrap this up, and I hope you were entertained. I hope it was fun. Maya, thank you as always for uh, your wonderful moderation and keeping us all on the happy straight and narrow. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye. Thanks again. I appreciate you all so much. No, I'm I'm not really afraid of spiders, but I do like to know where they are. So I'm not gonna snort laugh, but I'm gonna try to either capture or rescue the spider, whichever is appropriate, and relocate it to a more appropriate environment. Cause golly, it's big. All right. Full refund for no face. See you next time, everybody. Bye.